Welcome to Gus Tech. Today, we're going to build a computer. So let's build a computer. This computer is going to be a reasonably priced gaming and streaming machine. You're going to be able to stream to Twitch, YouTube gaming, whatever thing you want, and probably going to have some pretty serious performance out of it without breaking the bank. So if you're just building this computer with the components that we have listed here, not including Windows, not including a monitor, keyboard, mouse, headphones, speakers, a wireless card, whatever else you want to throw in there that's kind of extra, you're looking at probably about $1,200 to $1,300 depending on your configuration. But again, this is going to be a pretty standard build for a serious streaming gaming machine that's not going to be, too high performance, but get the job done. So first and foremost, we have an i7 6700K. This is the newest platform from Intel. It's the 1151 socket, and it's going to run extremely well, especially in streaming and gaming at the same time. This is the newest Skylake processor, and again, top of the line i7. You really can't get better than this unless you're going a high-end, and we're talking extremely high-end computer that's going to cost almost twice this just for the motherboard and processor and all the other junk along with it. We have a GTX 970. This is the Asus Strix OC edition. So it's going to come with a factory overclock. It's not anything serious, and you could probably get the same overclock from using pretty much any overclocking thing out there. MSI Afterburner would be great for it. Either way, it's a great graphic card, really great for cooling, and it should be one of the quieter graphic cards as far as the 970 series goes. So this is going to be powering the graphics on it. We got an unlocked version of the i7, so it doesn't come with a heatsink, which is actually really nice because you save some money if you do it that way, but you have to buy it from outside the U.S. because I can't think of a U.S. vendor that has it. So go on eBay. There's people that can get them for you for unlocked and no heatsink. Because we're putting an aftermarket heatsink on it anyway, which can just give me about $40-$45. It is the Hyper 212 Evo. This is one of the oldest and most reliable heat sinks there is. I mean, this has been around for like 8 years, and it works awesome, and they haven't changed the design like at all. So it works really well. We are going to be running a 500-watt power supply from evga. We don't need anything that's going to be super crazy because we're just going to be doing some minor overclocking, maybe some kind of intense air overclocking, but we're not going to have Freon running through it and liquid cooling and lights and lasers going through it. So with one graphic card, one overclock processor, a 500-watt power supply should get the job done for you, especially if it's EVGA. Samsung 850 EVO solid-state drive. This fixes a lot of the issues with the 840 EVO, which I have, and I hate because of those issues. I have to constantly deal with it and refresh my... Anyway, it's a pain in the butt. But this isn't a pain in the butt. They fixed the issues with the 850 EVO. It's cheap. It's fast. It's not really beaten by anybody out there. Maybe reliability-wise, Intel might have them trumped, but probably not. These just haven't been around long enough for us to see if they're like bulletproof. But again, Samsung has a great track record except for the 840 EVOs. So good solid-state drive. We have a 1 terabyte hard drive. This is from Seagate. That's it. I mean, it's hard drive. Well, that's loud. Sorry. It's a hard drive, so nothing too exciting. 7200 RPM, whatever. DDR4 RAM, are you kidding me? Yes, this is 2400 DDR4 RAM, and this is 16 gigabyte kit. If you know anything about RAM, it's not really that much better than DDR3, but it's still cool because it has DDR4 on it. So anyway, that's going into it, and it's supported by Skylake's platform, obviously, which is great. And last but not least, we have our motherboard, the Asus Z170A. This is kind of a mid-range motherboard from Asus. It's not going to be up there with their Sabertooth and their, Rampage Woblas or their Hero 5s or whatever. This is a solid motherboard, though. And honestly, everything kind of aside, if you're just doing overclocking, streaming, gaming, and you're not going to be running a ton of peripherals or you're not worried about having a ton of extra feature things on it, there's no reason to get those motherboards that cost you $400 or $500 because they just have features you're probably never going to use. Anyway, this is the core of our build. Last but not least, we have our case. this is the back of it. So there's that. This is Corsair Spec 2 Carbide, baby. It's one of the newer cases from Corsair. From what I've heard, it improves a lot on the cooling issues that they had with the Carbide series, because they used to look cool but couldn't cool for crap. And this should be a lot better for that. It is a mid-tower ATX case, and it should have plenty of room. As you can see, it bulks on the edges. Whoa! So it comes out, so you actually should have a lot of room for cable management. Let's start putting this thing that we're going to call a computer one day together. A lot of different PC makers on the interweb net are going to tell you that you should build your computer outside of your case before you put it in your case to make sure it all runs and functions properly. Well, those people are really diligent and have more time on their hands than I do. So I always just build it in the case first. And, honestly, troubleshooting isn't that hard because most modern cases allow you a lot of room to just screw around and fix things even when it's in the case. So when you're putting the motherboard in the case, which is one of the first steps of actually doing a build, and you can do, other parts in there first, but I like to put the motherboard in there first to make sure I have all the cables orienting where I need them to orient. You want to make sure, first and foremost, that your standoffs, which you can see here, these little standoffs are actually going to hold your motherboard in place, and they're going to serve as grounding connections for your motherboard. And as you can see, they're going to connect right here, 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 and here. Okay? Now you want to connect as many of these as possible. Some cases or motherboards may be a little bit weird as far as getting all of them in there. Having one or two missing probably shouldn't be a big deal. The reason you want these to all be in, if possible, is because these are grounding for your motherboard. This is going to prevent static shock to your motherboard or your components that are attached to it. So again, make sure you get these things in here properly, screw them down with all the standoffs in the back of the case, and then your motherboard will last you a good, amount of time for you to do things on it. Okay, so again, make sure that it's oriented properly as well, because different motherboards are going to fit different cases differently. So standard ATX is going to have a pretty standard layout, and just make sure it's matching when you're putting it in. Once your motherboard standoffs are in place, you're going to want to make sure you put on the back plate for your motherboard. This is to label all your connections, and you do want to have this here because it prevents dust and crumbs and little small mice from getting into your motherboard. I don't know many mice that would be able to get... Maybe you might get some mice in there, so just be careful about the mice.
It happens, dude.
Mice happens. Anyway, it should snap in really easily. These are all standard. They shouldn't matter what motherboard or what case you have, unless you got something that's like, from Cambodia or something. Cambodia might make computer parts that are really good. I have no idea, and that's racist. Anyway, it fits in real nice, snaps into place, and then you can put your motherboard in. Ta-da! All right, so once you have the motherboard mounted, then we're going to want to do a couple of things depending on how your build is actually going to work specifically. If you have an aftermarket CPU cooler, you want to make sure that you have access to it before you ever put the motherboard on, which, this is kind of basic stuff, but here's the thing. Almost every single case that you buy that's been made in the last 10 years, 5 years at least, is going to have access to in the back here to these little screws that you're going to put in for your mount. So you shouldn't worry too much about that. It's really not that big of an issue. And what we're going to do, because we do not have a CD drive, I would put the CD drive in first, or the disk drive, whatever you want to call it. And then you're going to want to put in your RAM. So let's go ahead and stick that in so that we can get adequate clearance for our CPU cooler after we put the RAM in. When putting in your RAM, this is probably the only time that I will check the motherboard manual literally every time I'm doing a build, because the orientation on the DIMM slots, which is your RAM slots, is going to be different as far as which ones are which channels, which ones are prioritized. Typically, you're going to want to put it in A1 and A2. Depending on your motherboard manufacturer, that will change. So you want to make sure you check this literally every time. For us and this wonderful Asus motherboard, it's going to be the first two slots because it's nice and simple. And you can see it, probably not in the video, but you can see it if you look really closely on the actual manual. It'll show you A1 and A2. The A's are always prioritized over B. This is really basic. I mean, if I have to explain this to you, you need to go to school for a little bit. one is more priority than two. Again, this is simple stuff, guys. Anyway, so let's go ahead and put the RAM in. So as we're putting the RAM in, you need to be really forceful like you are with your first child. And the nice thing is with these Asus boards, the new ones anyways, you can just stick it straight on. It's going to be really weird and hard to put in initially, but once you figure it out, it's pretty easy. Just push in the bottom first, snap in the top. The little bottom part here should drop, and it'll actually snap into place. And again, because our wonderful Asus manufacturer has made the first two slots the most prioritized ones, we're going to put both in the first two slots. And if we needed to use the second two slots, it's not that big of an issue. It's not going to cause any problems. But make sure that you're putting, if you just have two pieces of RAM, two sticks of RAM, that you're putting them in the right place. They need to be in the same channel so that you're running everything effectively. Now we're going to want to put our CPU into the socket. This is an Intel CPU, so they've been the same for a very long time. It's really, really an incredibly simple installation process. You find the little arrow in the bottom left corner. You're going to want to make sure that's in the bottom left. It's going to match what it is on your motherboard, which is the bottom left, unless for some reason it's, Cambodian. Okay, so once we get that mounted in there, we take this little control arm here, make sure it's all seated properly, and it shouldn't move when it's seated properly. You want to make sure you're avoiding any bent pins. And you're going to have to apply a fair amount of pressure to get this down. And you're going to feel like you're breaking it, but that's how computer building is. You feel like you're breaking everything. Anyway, make sure it's stuck on there. It's going to be solid, not moving. And then we can apply the heatsink. All right, the next thing we're going to do is stick the heatsink on top of our processor. We're not going to show this in detail because every heatsink is going to be slightly different. They all come with instructions like these that you can look at. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to need a pretty rudimentary knowledge of how to read to follow through with it. Again, it's really not that complicated. It just takes a while. So we're going to stick it on there with the magic of movies. Once we get the heatsink installed, and keep in mind with this case, which is the Corsair Carbide Spec 2, the Hyper 212 Evo does fit like barely. So you can't get anything bigger than this heatsink for this, or else it won't fit. But once you get it in and everything is good to go there, we're going to put in the solid state drive, the hard drive, then we're going to move on to the graphic card, and finally we'll put in the power supply and we'll route all the cables and make sure it's all managed well. So let's get to the storage. With this case, we have a nice little mount here for the solid state drive. So we're just going to slide it in without too much issue. If it doesn't want to give us issue. Oh, there we go. All right, and then we'll just make sure that this screw is tightened once that's in there so that it fits nice and snug. Okay, we're set with the solid state drive. Next up, we're going to take our hard drive out of a static free bag and stick it in. Hard drives always orient, or at least nowadays they always orient to the back of the case where you have cable management going. And this is another quick access, easy one, so we'll just slide it in. And make sure it fits in properly. Most cases are going to have a quick release. This has a strange little quick release right here. I wasn't really familiar with before, but it actually works pretty nice. You just got to pull that out as you're putting it in so it doesn't get caught on the screws. But once it's in, make sure it's nice and snug. You don't want that moving around. That's the one piece you don't want moving around. And again, it's snug in there. So once we have these in, now we can focus on the graphic card. Next up, we're going to put our obsessively large graphic card. Thank you, Asus, for making it excessively large. And take off the little protector here because this, obviously plastic's not going to connect. I mean, come on, guys. This is pretty simple. Anyway, you got a heatsink on the back here. Ooh, nice and flashy. That's pretty standard with 970s. And we're going to go ahead and stick it in. Now, it's going to seem, if you've never built a computer before, like you're putting it upside down. Yes, the fans are supposed to go on the bottom unless you're using a Silverstone case. Or something that orients the motherboard upside down. As you can see, the logo is even going to be oriented like this. So this is the correct way to do it. Make sure you remove your PCI Express access right here. You're going to use the top PCI Express lane. Always use this lane first. Don't ever use these other ones first. Always use this one because in a lot of motherboards, especially cheaper motherboards, this is the only one that has a full 16 lanes available. Some of the nicer motherboards will have 16 here, 16 here, but generally speaking, you're going to get your best performance, and the motherboard's going to recognize it most easily here in the top one. Obviously, the more graphic cards you put in here, the less lanes you're going to have overall, but that's for another time. So, let's go ahead and stick this baby in here. It's pretty easy to get in once you have everything aligned properly, and you just kind of jam it in there like you're forcing a baby to eat. I don't know why you'd use force like this to get a baby to eat. You'd be really weird if you did. And then take these screws and screw them back in. Same ones that you removed earlier to remove your PCI Express access, and stick them right there in those holes. We're going to go ahead and do that. Now keep in mind, these screws are going to be the only thing supporting the outside of your graphic card, unless your case comes with some sort of a mount that supports it. These graphic cards are heavy. These heat sinks on them are heavy. They have liquid cooling in the pipes and a lot of metal. So you want to make sure that you screw these in tight. I mean tighter than anything else on your case. Super tight. And the reason I say that again is because this is the only thing supporting your graphic card on the outside. So when you're moving it, you don't want it to, break or put undue pressure on your motherboard. So make sure it's elevated when you're screwing it in, like I did, and then again screw it in real tight. These are our access to SLI. Leave these on if you're not screwing without SLI. They're just going to protect the connections, and you don't want those to get messed up or bumped. So once we have the graphic card in, we can go ahead and move down to our power supply. Next thing we're going to do is stick our power supply into the case. This is not a modular power supply, and if it's your first time building a computer, modular power supplies aren't the greatest thing in the world, but they are nice to keep cable management without actually needing to do much cable management, because you can just keep the plugs out that you're not using. However, this one's not modular at all, and it's almost going to make it a little bit easier if you're not familiar with it. So, I don't know, you win some, you lose some. Just depends on whether or not you really care about how the insides of your case look. Make sure when you're using a bottom-mounted PSU, you always put the fan oriented down. Always, because they have intake here at the bottom of the case, as we showed you earlier, and that's going to filter out the air and things like that, and you don't want to have your air coming from the inside of your case to try and cool this. You want it to be coming from the bottom underneath it. So anyway, let's go ahead and make sure all the plastic's off of it. Ooh. And stick it on here. It should slide in nice and easily without too much effort. Most cases now are going to have basic mounting supports on here, so they're just going to kind of guide it in once you get it placed. And then you take all these jumble of cords here, and you try and get them to go through those holes in the back there. And honestly, I would, as a general practice, try and get every single cord to go through here before you start working on it, because you don't want to do it individually. It's going to get annoying, painstaking. And again, if you care at all about how your case looks, which you probably care a little bit, you spent money on it, it's a nice window, make sure that all these cords, these unsightly cords, are out of the way. So we'll just kind of feed those through here. We're going to reorient the case here, show you guys how to screw your power supply in. So as you can see, there's going to be a few different contact points. Different power supplies have different contact points. Thank you, industries, for not being standardized. We have on this case, for this power supply, we're going to have a mounting screw here, one here, and one here. You want to screw in all of these. It's going to give you nice support, and most cases have anti-vibration when all of them are connected. I can't promise you anything, but it's probably going to be a little bit better if you do it that way. Now, you can find the screws to screw in your power supply either from the motherboard screws that you have from your case. Those are the same thread. They should be the same thread. That's an industry standard. You can also find them with your power supply. So if, for example, you have, for some reason, like a white power supply, and you want white screws, it may come with white screws, whereas the case may be black, or vice versa. So that's the only reason why I would worry about it. But I always just use the power supply ones because I know they're threaded properly. So let's get that screwed in nice and tight. And that is how you put your power supply in, at least initially. A couple of things you're going to want to pay attention to when you're playing with these cables. Some of them are really easy to identify. This is obviously a SATA power. I mean, it's you can't miss it. It only goes onto your disk drives and your hard drive, your solid state drive, things like that. So this is getting basically your storage, things like that. So these will always look the same. They're really easy to figure out. They only go to those disk drives and hard drives, other junk. This is what we call a Molex connection. It's a 4-pin Molex. What that does is it's going to just provide power to things like fans, case fans, various other things. Most case fans and most motherboards nowadays, you're going to have enough inputs on your motherboard itself to plug in your case fans with PWM controllers. So you shouldn't worry about it. You can see there's a PWM controller on here on the Molex, but this doesn't actually control it. So if you plug them into these Molex connectors, they're going to run at full speed. There's no options to mess with them. Plug them into the motherboard if you can. These are almost completely obsolete. That's why we only have one set of them in this newer power supply. This connection right here is this is your main power. So this is going to run your 24 connector to your actual motherboard. This provides basically all the power to your motherboard. That's subsequently going to provide power to your fans, to your things that are attached to it, whatever else, heat sinks, whatever that needs to move or repowered within that motherboard. So this is very important. It's almost always going to be 24 connections, although it is removable to be a 20 connection piece. But again, if you're building your own computer, you're probably going to be using a 24 pin. So that's how it looks, and we'll show you how to orient that in a second. Next up, we have our PCI Express. Now, most graphic cards nowadays use the 8-pin PCI Express like this, and you can see it's removable just like the 24-pin was. And this is as an 8-pin connector. This will give you power to your graphic card. Most graphic cards are going to support 8-pin, just one 8-pin. Some are going to require 2 8-pins. So this comes with 2 8-pins. This can power a 980 Ti. This can power, I mean, pretty much anything that's super beefed up. If you're going to be running a multiple graphic card setup, make sure that you have multiple PCI Express cables. This only comes with 2, but it will power 2 graphic cards with this. Since it's only 500 watts, though, I wouldn't recommend it. So anyway, that's that. Last but certainly not least, we have our 8-pin CPU connectors. These are 2 4-pins, as you can see. Lower power CPUs are going to use 1 4-pin, but these are 8 pins. Make sure that it's oriented correctly. If it's not oriented correctly, you're not going to get power to your CPU, and you won't be able to get a system start. So when you're plugging these in, and that'll go on the top of the motherboard, just make sure that it is oriented properly, because these can sometimes slip in even without proper orientation. You can usually tell by the snap. Most of them are going to have the brackets that are going to take these. The female counterparts are going to have a bracket on top to snap. All right, so once we get the power supply cables all plugged in and everything's plugged in the way you want it, if you're not using a modular power supply, you're going to be left with a bunch of these things. Now, most cases are pretty cool when they include multiple areas for your hard drive, because there's a bunch of space underneath them. Now I'm going to show you the GusTech official way of doing cable management. And it doesn't get much more official than that, folks. You shove it in there as much as you can. You put the cover over it, and you just forget about it, because even if it has a window, no one's going to look underneath your freaking hard drive. And putting it all under here and putting it all on these zip ties and crap, you're never going to be able to mess with your computer. And I have serious qualms with people that say that they love building PCs and they're enthusiasts, and they have everything zip tied. It's like, are you kidding me? You can't even add a freaking hard drive without totally redoing all of your cable management for half an hour. It's retarded. This is cable management. It's managed. They're not going anywhere. Anyway, that's just a little whatever. And they're all right here. Yay, cool. Now we can start plugging in everything else. Let's get the headers for your USB plugged in, USB 3.0 header plugged in, and these are your power things, and we're going to get them all, trying to get them behind the graphics card. Then we'll plug in the SATA cables that we need for the hard drives. and you'll be ready to plug in and turn on your computer. So your USB 3.0 header, it's going to look like this. It's really unique, so if you can see this, you can see what I'm talking about. And it only goes in one place on the motherboard, for most motherboards anyway. It's going to be right next to the 24-pin power connector. It'll be right there. So it does have an orientation. There's a little divot that pops out there. And you plug it in. You got to use some force and get that sucker in there. Then you can take these wires and pull them back out so you can get some cable management or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Next, let's get the power plugged in. These are the power switches. Now, these are kind of weird. Consult your motherboard manual because some of the orientations are going to be different on these. So just try it out and you'll figure it out slowly. But these almost always are going to be in the exact same spot. It's going to be right down here on your motherboard, bottom right corner. And there's going to be a little diagram that explains where to plug them in, but it's not super helpful. So again, consult your motherboard manual. We're going to stick those in now. Last but not least, we have our HD audio. This is for our headset and microphone inputs. And all you got to do is just kind of scan along here and just make sure that you're putting it in the right place. There's a couple different ones. It looks just like a USB header, except it has a different stop on here. So you just got to look for it, know what you're looking for. Consult your manual again if you're confused. Don't ask us because we're not going to help you. We're just Gus Tech. We're just a silly YouTube channel. All right. Once that's plugged in, same deal. You can pull all these out of the back and kind of get yourself some semblance of cable management. Again, you know, no one really cares. You don't actually care as much as you think you do. Internet, you think you do, but you don't really care. Anyway, get these all out of here to look at least kind of nice. And that's a pretty well-organized little machine, if you ask me personally. Once we're at this point, before you put the case on and everything like that, go ahead and fire it up and make sure it's working. And make sure that your power things are oriented. If you're not getting a power signal initially, or it's not turning on when you push the power button, make sure that your power supply is turned to the on position. There is a switch on it. Next thing you're going to want to make sure is that your actual power input here from your input, your I/O panel in front of your case, make sure that that is oriented correctly. Turn it over, play around with it. I've had times where I've had to replace these like 8 times before it works effectively because they're not labeled very well. It's really hard to read it even if you look at the manual. So you can play around with it. You'll get familiar with it. I promise that's a pretty standard mistake. If you do that and you're doing it exactly the way that the manual is telling you and you're still not getting a power or you're getting a flash of power, the next thing you need to check is right here. This is your 24-pin power connector. Make sure it's in properly, it's properly oriented, and it's snapped in. You're going to have to apply a lot of force to snap this thing in, and you're going to feel like you're going to break your motherboard. I've never broken a motherboard putting one in, and I've put a lot of force into them, so you're probably not going to break it either. The next thing, if you're getting a flash of power, is you're going to want to check the CPU power cable. Again, orientation is key. Make sure that the clips are oriented properly. Make sure the holes are in there, and make sure that it is pushed in as far as it can be pushed in, and you can apply a lot of force. I promise you're not going to break your motherboard. I don't promise that. I'm not responsible for anything you do that breaks your stuff, you crazy people. Next thing you want to check is your graphic card, your PCI Express power. This shouldn't prevent a startup, but it may give you a blank screen because, when you have your input put into here, it's just not going to show anything because your power is not sufficient for your graphic card. Those are the only things that are really going to prevent it from starting up. Anything outside of that, and you may have a grounding issue, and that's pretty serious. So if you have a grounding issue, and the way to identify that is to try and get behind your motherboard somehow, and you're going to have to be creative, and make sure that none of those pins are touching the case. If a single pin is touching the case, it will or should not allow it to start up. It should just totally say, hey, I'm not grounding properly. There's something screwing with the pin, and it should just not start. I've had Molex cables occasionally that are touching it, so if you're doing crazy cable management, especially in the back here, that can be a pretty frequent problem if you have a Molex cable that touches any of these pins. Again, it'll cause an automatic shut-off. So what we're going to do next, because we know it turns on just fine, so once we know it turns on and everything starts up just fine, You can even install Windows while it's in this state if you want to make sure that you're 100% good. But once you're done with that, then you're going to want to just push all these cables to the side best you can and just force that freaking back side of the case on, because I promise you that's what everybody who messes with their computer regularly does, because it's so much easier than dealing with zip ties. So anyway, that's what I always do. Just kind of jam the suckers over, stick it on there, make sure there's no metal touching your motherboard again. That's really important. And you should be good to go. You should have a solid computer that's going to run Minecraft and Internet Explorer. So, wow. Facebook time, baby. Load up Instagram. We got some filters. Yeah, baby. And there you have it. This is the completed PC. You can see in the window, not really, because it's kind of darkened. If you want to put a LED light strip and have a laser show going, and like you can have a cool. It's retarded if you do that. Anyway, it's going to work really well. If you just follow the video, you should have no problems. If you do have issues or questions or whatever, go to reddit.com/r/buildapc and post your build on there before you even build it. They'll recommend you use pcpartpicker.com to build your computer. I recommend the same. Links to those are in the description below. And again, they're going to help you out with any troubleshooting you may have or making sure it works properly. It's really not that hard to build your own computer, guys. I promise you can do it. And then you can stop being a console peasant and, playing stupid console games. I'm just kidding. Some console games are great. And for streaming, we recommend the Elgato HD60 as a capture card you can use on your computer, your Xbox, your PS4, your iPads, whatever. You can use it on pretty much anything as long as it has HDMI. You can use it to stream at 60 FPS, 1080p on Twitch, YouTube Gaming, whatever platform you decide to use. And it works pretty smoothly. So we recommend this if you guys are looking to stream. You don't want to put undue stress on your computer or whatever you're using, Xbox, PS4. Additionally, for your video capture, you're going to want to use the Logitech C920. This is probably one of the best webcams you can get for the money. It does HD 1080p. I mean, it's freaking awesome. And you can manipulate it with their software to make sure it's all, fitting where you need it to be, and it looks nice and whatever before you go into OBS or whatever else. Super great. Love this webcam. I use it. Brock uses it. Everybody we talk to that does streaming on a regular basis, especially for gaming, uses this. It's fantastic, and it's cheap. I mean, we're talking, less than $60 usually, $70, especially if you get it on sale. So, anyway, check this out. Overall, when you have these pieces all together, you can have a very cheap and effective gaming and streaming PC. This thing will run basically any modern title with some of the most intense graphics out there, usually at the maximum settings. Minus maybe, Shadows of Mordor or some of the major graphically intensive games. But even then, you're probably still going to get 60 FPS on pretty much everything you touch. Again, it's cheap. It's not hard. If you have questions, make sure to refer to those links I mentioned earlier. Thanks again for watching our video of how to build your own mid-range gaming and streaming PC with high performance. This is going to give you basically top-level performance without the top-level price, and it's going to work phenomenally. So if you have any questions about it or a build that you're looking to do in general, refer to those links I mentioned earlier. They are in the description of the video below. You can also find links to all of the products that we used to film this video today, including all of the build products in the description below. Click those, purchase them from our Amazon affiliate. It does really help us to make more videos like this and to continue providing content for you guys. Thanks again for watching. Leave a comment if you have any questions, concerns, really want to be heard. I don't know, you just have something to say. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more. And again, we are Gus Tech. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.